Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Now What Show. I'm your host, Amber Christian, and I am delighted to welcome Jacob Curtis from Curtis Accounting Solutions as our guest today. I promise we're going to have fun. Don't worry. This one, don't tune out. This is going to be a really interesting conversation and a super important one. Now, before we introduce Jacob a little further, I'd like to share a message from our season sponsor. We are delighted to have Go Imagine as our season sponsor for the podcast. Go Imagine is focused on building the maker community through a handmade marketplace, maker business education, custom websites, and a social app designed for artists called Maker Circle. The Go Imagine community includes thousands of handmade business owners throughout the United States who are passionate about growing a handmade platform dedicated to quality handmade items while focusing on social good that's helping children in need. So go ahead and check them out at goimagine.com. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Jacob Curtis to the show. Jacob, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. It's great to be in here and talking with everybody. I love the community. So a little bit of background to me. I used to be a corporate CPA and work in, you know, the traditional corporate kind of a world, even wearing on the day of my interview a suit and tie to it. So it kind of gives you an idea of where I come from. I am a CPA, but I have a mom who grew up doing arts and crafts and sewing and things, and so she started a business a few years ago, and that kind of inspired me to really start my own thing and really use the skills that I've garnered to help others in the community. So I started my business, Curtis Accounting Solutions, in the fall of 2019. So it's been a few years, but
Mhm.
it's been a great journey, and I've met great people like yourself, Amber, and a lot of others. So yeah, does that answer the question a little bit?
Absolutely. And it's always fun talking with you because you're in the world of craft. You have a foot in this world. And so I've been collaborating with Jacob for a while because as a lot of people know in the world of craft, sometimes when you're outside of that world, some of the unique things that are a little quirky about us as an industry people don't always necessarily recognize, and you're already in this world because of the quilt shop world. And so it's like, hey, no, I already get a lot of what's going on and the heart and the love that goes into all the products and the creativity that people put into those products. So that makes it fun because I know that you come with this deep appreciation for the industry already, in your background, and so makes it a little easier to talk about, a variety of the topics because you have a lot of empathy because you're like, hey, been there, totally get that. So now what we want to talk about today is this is one of the tougher topics for new business owners. We're going to talk about the whole finance and accounting world and profit first and what this is. And what I want to have people come out that are listening to this episode is just an encouragement to learn more about this methodology and to be starting to think about. I know you're spending a lot of time producing your products and you're like, just those first sales are exciting, but starting to think about how you make sure it's going to be a profitable business so that sort of when the love runs out at a certain period of time, there's money left in that business. So, Jacob, can you tell us more about what the Profit First methodology is and give us a little bit of background
Yeah.
of the thought process behind it?
Yeah. So the short answer is Profit First is a cash management system. It's basically your grandma's budgeting envelope system that's been modernized and adapted for business for today.
Mhm.
And the reason I came across it, I'm going to tell a little bit of a story to kind of help make it hopefully make sense. But so I mentioned earlier that my mom has a store, a quilt store specifically, a long arm quilting service. And in 2013 is when she started that. And at the time, I was finishing up school and just helping her a little bit coming tax season to do the bookkeeping and all that kind of thing. I graduated school, went on to my corporate job. She continued with her store. And then about in the fall of 2019, about when I started my own firm here, she came to me in tears. She called me one day and she's like, "Can you come over to our house? I have a question for you." So my wife and I drove over to their house. We lived about 20 minutes away, and we opened the door. I was like, "Mom, what's going on?" She's like, "I want out. I can't do this anymore." And I was like, "Whoa, whoa, what's going on? Tell me,
Whoa.
tell me what is happening." And she's like, you're going to prepare our taxes and you're going to find out that I don't have any money, and yet the state is calling me to pay sales taxes. I
Mhm.
owe basically over $50,000 in debt, and I don't have a dime to my name that can be used for the business. There's no money in the business. And I was like, that is so weird. And I was like, but your sales are doing great. What's going on? And she's like, I don't know. I don't have any money, and they're calling, and they're gonna come take away my machines and put a chain on the door. And I was like, well, hold on, let's figure this out. And so we sat down and talked, and she wanted to know the options of how to get out. Do you file bankruptcy? What are all those things? And I kind of backed her off
Mm.
the away from the cliff edge
Get
there.
her
It's
off
like,
the
okay,
cliff. Yeah.
get her off the
Yeah.
cliff. Let's talk this through. What's going on? She's like, I don't know what happens to the money that comes in. I use it to pay the bills. And by the time I need it to pay the sales tax at the end of the quarter, I don't have any money. When it's time to bring home a little grocery money for myself, I barely scrape enough by to, buy the basics. And so I said, well, let's talk about more of what we can do to solve this. She's like, okay. And so my wife and I sat down and talked with her and my dad, and we talked for a little bit about all the nitty gritty details of who she owes and how much she owes and all that kind of stuff. And we determined that we should help her out. Actually, we came to the conclusion that this is actually a viable business. We just need to shift a little bit and help her out. And so to help her get out of the immediate relief, I actually became a co-owner and invested a little bit with my mom, and because I trusted her in the business model. And I said, but we're going to make a little bit of a change. I'm going to step in as your quote unquote CFO and help manage the finances. And so that's what we did for the first year. Um, we made sure the books were all kept up to date. We made sure taxes were paid on time, but we really hadn't made any debt or any progress towards paying off the debt. She was paying close to, I think, 2,500 to 3,000 a month in just debt payments,
In
and for
debt.
her little store, that was
That's
huge.
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot. And so she, after that first year, I was a little confused. I was like, what's going on? I prepared the tax return and we were reviewing it together. And she's like, well, hold on, I don't understand. Why do I owe taxes if we don't have any money? And then that's what it clicked. For some reason over the last year, I realized that we needed a cash management system. Bookkeeping and
Hmm.
doing all that kind of stuff was not really enough. That was all after the fact. After we had made those decisions, that's when we had started doing the bookkeeping and recording that, right? And so because those getting the financial reports weren't as immediate, we just kind of reverted looking at the bank account and guesstimating,
Uh-huh.
what things were going to be. And it turns out that we didn't have a real time system to actually manage the cash flow, because cash flow is what's king in a business, right? You have to have cash to be able to pay your vendors, and if you have employees and buy supplies, like if you don't have cash, you're in trouble. And so that's when I started looking around it, and I kind of reached out to a couple different colleagues and friends who are in the industry and the coach and things like that. And somebody actually recommended that I read the book Profit First. And I was like,
Hmm.
profit first? That sounds weird. Why would I put my profit first? Like that's the I really want profit, but I've got all these other things I've got to deal with. Like, how can I put profit first? But I picked up the book on because we were kind of at that desperate moment. I
Hmm.
was edging closer and closer to that cliff edge. And I realized, oh, okay, we read the book and it just clicked with me. It's like, oh, this makes so much more sense. And I thought back to my corporate days when I worked for a company that was doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And I thought, that's why they have so many bank accounts, is it helps manage the cash flow of the business. And I started thinking in there as an accountant, I could see a lot of information. And I saw, oh, well, we have a business I work for had a payroll account. They had an operating account. They had a marketing budget account. We had probably 11 or 12 different accounts for the business to operate through. And it clicked that that's exactly what small businesses need. Typically, when as a small business owner, you get started, you go to the bank, you open up your first business checking account, and sometimes you'll get a savings account that we may or may not use very often, but we get just one big plate to look at all of the money.
Hmm.
And that's exactly how my mom was operating her business. And yet, when we look at these larger businesses and look at their success, they have multiple bank accounts. They have a whole treasury department set aside just specifically to manage the cash flow. And so Profit First is really the small business version of that.
Hmm.
And that's what's been so powerful. So I immediately implemented it. And within 18 months, we had paid off $50,000 of debt and saved up $10,000. I was blown away. I
Hmm.
was like, you've got to be kidding me. This was so simple to set up. How in the world did we not think of this? Like, it's just like a no brainer.
Hmm.
And so it was, and that's kind of like the amazing story, is just the simplicity and clarity it brings to how the cash flows in and out of the business.
Mhm. So
So,
now we're going to unpack a few things because for
yes.
new business owners, so one of the first things we should unpack, here's a big ugly. Tax timing is not the same as when you collect your taxes, especially like sales tax. So, and again, we're speaking about the US here. I'm sure it's the same in other countries. I've done tax work in other countries in their systems, so I know that there's timing differences between you may collect the money, but you have to remit it to the government later. And depending on what systems you're using, in some cases, you may have a system that automatically collects that sales tax and deals with that remittance, or you may not. So for here's a perfect example for everybody. I'll use from have my little pop-up artisan food business that I run a few times a year, which I love and no capacity to do more. And I have to collect sales tax as part of that because where I am physically located, technically we have to charge sales tax on that. And so I have to collect that sales tax as part of the purchase. I use Square, and so I collect it all through Square. It's all set up there. And then I have to separately remit it on a different schedule to the government. So one thing for people that remember your tax, depending on the platform and how you're doing it, you may have to remit it yourself on a schedule that's not the same as when you collect the cash. That's one of these separate things that Jacob is talking about of, well, I have to have somewhere to put that tax money so that when the tax man or woman cometh, I have it to pay. I just have to separate that out immediately. So that's one of the first big pieces that he is talking about and saying, "Hey, I naturally have to separate certain kinds of things because there are timing differences in my business." So most people I talk to, I say, "How did tax go that first year?" And almost universally, everybody goes, "Oh, it was bad," unless they knew to get all of these kinds of things set up. The other thing you brought up, let talk more about this idea of I look at what's in the bank account to pay my bills and how that can really go wrong as a small
Yeah.
business, right? Because as you had said, well, she would just look at, well, I have this cash in my account, so then I just pay my bills. Where else does that cause problems in the business if you do that?
Yeah, so if you do that too much, what happens is you overbuy an inventory. At least that's what happens in my case and a lot of my clients' cases. I work with a lot of people that like that's my bread and butter is people who have in the craft industry who have inventory. And so they overbuy inventory that they think they can turn around and sell within just a few months. And it turns out it's more like 6 or 12 months, depending on what's going on. And so combined with the delay in the tax payments, in our case it was sales tax, other cases it may be your annual income taxes, right?
Hmm.
um, and just making sure that you have that. Credit card bills are another one, right? Because they don't make you pay the full balance. You can set aside a little bit and just pay the minimum balance for a few months, and then I'll pay my minimum balance for a few months, and before you know it, that minimum balance is now $300 or $400 or $500, maybe even more, and you're like, well, hold on, how did I have all this inventory? Why is it not? What's going on here? And so that's kind of where you really get in trouble is when you start not paying for things in with the cash you actually have. You start borrowing extra from even inadvertently from yourself and from credit cards and things like that, and it can get overwhelming, honestly.
Hmm. Absolutely. Or the other thing that I have seen happen to people, oh, I need some money right now. So then they sort of fire sale product or
Oh,
really
all the
reduce
time.
the prices to move product. Well, when you've done that, you're not collecting enough to have a profit margin to pay you, something to pay all of the bills. So you can get yourself trapped in this cycle of, oh, quick, quick, I need cash, so I sort of fire sale or reduce my prices to try to generate quick cash. But that gets worse and worse and worse over time, where you kind of want to back up and say, no, I have to start sort of separating my cash a little bit, setting
Oh yeah.
setting kind of money aside. So tax is one big bucket. What else in kind of earlier stage businesses? What else would you separate? They kind of as they're first thinking about this, how would you start separating that?
Yeah, so what I recommend if you're just starting out within, either day zero or you're within your first couple of years and even beyond, if you don't have these accounts set up, I would recommend them. So I recommend you set up 6 accounts. You may already have an existing one, but the first one where I would recommend is the income account. it's basically just the collection plate. It collects all the payments that come in from your customers, and from there, you can then allocate or transfer the money to the other buckets, and based on some percentages that you work out in your business. And so, one of those is inventory, one of those is tax, one of those is profit, which is actually like your emergency funds and things like that. One of those is the owner's compensation, so that you can actually get paid for your hard work. I mean, you do work, right? And
Mhm.
often owners are the least paid person in a business, which is ironic because they started the business generally to make a little extra money, if not be the sole provider for their family. And then the last account that you want to open up is your operating account. So you should have a total of six there, where that's how you manage the cash flow. And based on those margins, and margins are so key. So if you're constantly having those fire sales and discounting prices to move inventory because you need the cash to pay bills, um, that just kind of, like you said, it kind of compounds. If you do it 1 month, a couple months down the road, you may need to do it again, and then again, and then again, and then again. And then basically what you're ending up doing is about every 2 months, 2 to 3 months, you're doing this fire sale. And that's only when you have sales, right? You have maybe have a trickle throughout in between them, but your customers now know, oh, I know if I just wait a couple months, she's going to put that on sale and then I can get it. And that's not a
Yes.
great plan, because now you've kind of created this cycle where you get into a panic, money all comes in, you pay your bills, you feel a little bit of instant relief, but then it starts all over again. And you just get in this grind, this rat race of, okay, I got to make this and sell it and put it on discount so it'll sell faster so I can get the cash so I can pay the bills. But now I need to make more money so that I can pay other bills. And it's just a never ending cycle.
Hmm. And I think that's also an important one of the real risk you run, especially if you're in an early stage business. You think, oh, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, I just do that a few times, and you set that expectation in the mind of the customer. And a loyal customer that may come back and want to buy product for you regularly, you're training them that they should wait for your sale. And that becomes problematic in the long run for your business. And so even, a lot of times when people start businesses, they start with like no money at all. Find a way to get a little bit of money into that business. And it's not all about the
Mm.
sales, whether you might have to work a side thing or come up with something to have a little bit of cash of seed money to start that, so that then when the revenue comes in, you can start splitting it. If you try to start from, oh, I sort of even finance this first part on my credit card and then I'm getting in the sales, day one, you're going to end up in a fire sale problem. So, a big thing if you're early stage, really think about how will you make sure there is enough cash to do this properly when getting started. I think it's not wise to say, well, every dollar I invest in the business, I'm going to get back immediately, because you're not. And that's going to take a little while. And this is something we don't talk about as an industry, to say you have to have a little cushion as you get started. Doesn't necessarily have to be enormous, but you have to do that so that you can properly set your profit margins and get things, and then wait people out if it takes a little longer to sell, so that you don't have to train them. So that's another thing I've seen a lot, and I want to kind of caution people to say, be careful about that, because that's setting up what you do going forward in your business. So we are getting close to our 20 minutes already. We could
All
go
right.
on and on for years, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to have you back on some future
Yeah.
episodes so we can just keep talking about some of this, because there's a lot of nuance to how you manage it, how you manage as it grows. Even the life cycle of cash is a
Oh,
whole
yeah.
nother kind of topic that I think is really good to talk about, so that business owners are like, okay, I understand there's a flow to all of this stuff. So now tell our listeners where they can find out more information about you and about your company.
Yeah. So my name's Jacob Curtis. I'm a CPA. You can follow Jacob Curtis CPA on Facebook and the other socials. You can also follow me with at Curtis Accounting Solutions. That's my website, curtisaccountingsolutions.com. I have on my website a free Profit First starting guide that kind of walks you through the steps of setting up Profit First in your business. And I'm always available for a phone call. You can always schedule a call and we can get on if needed. But you can follow me at Curtis Accounting Solutions, curtisaccountingsolutions.com, Jacob Curtis CPA, and that's where you can find me.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jacob. And thank you again to our sponsor, Go Imagine. Go check them out. Go check out what Jacob has to offer again. And we'll see you next time.
Yep, thanks.